I totally understand. Okay, do not. And my sense, one way or the other, is that it'll be based upon the kids' golf schedule next summer. Good idea. Good job, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, in case you couldn't tell by my clothing, we're going to talk about. Hey, how are you? We're going to talk about America and Judaism. There's a real problem going on in the world right now. Well, there's a lot of real problems going on in the world right now. But one of them is that there's this anti-Semitic flavor to the country, being led by these social influencers like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and these kind of people. Being led, by the way, also by Vice President J.D. Vance. And today I had a talk with Jonathan Tobin, who's the CEO of JNS, Jewish News Syndicate, and I asked him who is the most dangerous and least good for the Jews political official. He said, well, there's a lot, but the worst at the top is J.D. Vance.
Really?
Yep. And then he said, oh yeah,
who's the best?
Wow. And I said, and who's the best? He goes, without a question, Marco Rubio. So, but there's this hatred going on, and part of the line that is said is that you cannot be a Jew and be a good American. When in reality, you cannot be a real patriotic American and be an anti-Semite. Nor can you be a Jew and not be a patriotic American. Because our roots are so deeply embedded in this nation, so deeply ensconced from the very beginning, before the beginning of the nation, literally the very beginning of finding the new world, so to speak, that we need to understand. So we're going to go through some history, and before we even go that, I just want to fast forward in the 1890s. Mark Twain, who I'm a huge fan of, I don't know who else is. I love Twain. Mark Twain wrote an article where he said that the Jews, he perpetuated this 130 years ago, whatever. He said that the Jews are actually not serving in the military and they're not good Americans. As a result, I think it was 63 Jewish Civil War veterans started an organization, and they took that organization. They then reached out to him. To his credit, he wrote an apology and a retraction. And that group of 63 is the Jewish, it was JFW, Jewish Veterans of Foreign Wars. Now I think it's just called Jewish War Veterans now. And they are the longest active organization for veterans in the history of our nation. So we are there. So we're going to talk about this kind of stuff and kind of go this. Good, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit more about J.D. Vance, because I've heard this, but I haven't really seen it.
I can't. We'll wait till we're off camera. I will. Okay. I will. Because I try to keep politics out of it. But
understood.
Here's your simple answer. His favorite podcaster is Theo Vaughn, who is a raging anti-Semite.
Wait.
Okay.
What's the relationship?
It's his favorite podcaster. That's by his own token. For years, he employed Tucker Carlson's son.
He did hire Tucker Carlson.
Okay, so I'm going to move a little bit this way. So, who wants to begin? Who discovered America in theory?
Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus. He was a Yid. So, go ahead. Who wants to read at the beginning of page 1?
Christopher Columbus and discovery of America. The majority of Spain's Jewish population converted to Judaism after the pogroms of 1300. Many of these Jews converted in name only, leading to the Inquisition being established in 1481 to find out who was really still a Jew, and were called conversos or Moranos.
Morano was a slang term. It actually means swine. Okay, go on.
A derogatory term meaning swine.
Forgot I wrote that. Okay.
No, I'm
Is that important?
You asked me to read. You asked me to read. The conversos often took on Catholic names such as Jesus, Mary, and Christopher. They continued to practice Judaism in secret, letting their children know at 13 they were really Jewish.
So at 13, they take the kid down. What was the bar mitzvah? They take him down to the cell and say, "They're not have this here yet." And that's our people, and we're hiding from that. That's what the conversos were. The Inquisition was actually started in response because they realized there were so many Jews who were not saying they're Catholics but weren't really Catholics. So Yosef changed his name to Jesus, and Miriam changed her name to Mary or Maria. Okay, so please continue.
The Alhambra, is that near us? The Alhambra decree issued on March 31st, 1492, ordered the expulsion of practicing Jews from the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon by July 31st of that year. Could Columbus have been a converso? There is
That's really the question. Was Columbus Jewish?
That's
the question.
Was he circumcised?
We don't have records, so there was no one who said, "You know what?
That's it.
Go on."
There is no real way to know as there weren't birth certificates, etc. There are numbers of theories that he wasn't even from Genoa, but actually was Spanish, based on his fluency of the language in his writing and his lack of fluency of Italian. But here are some of the hints that may indeed have been that he may have indeed have been a Jew.
These are just some hints. We're going to get to proof later. Some hints. Go on.
Modern Spanish scholars such as Jose Arrugo,
Bunch of Spanish guys. Go on.
a bunch of Spanish guys, Celso Garcia de la Riga, I'm practicing my Spanish, Otero Sanchez, and Nicolas Diaz Perez, that concluded that Columbus was a Morano based on the large amount of clues to his background. There were two batches of ships that sailed from Spain, Port of Palos, on August 3rd, 1492. A batch of ships carrying Jews and a bunch of Jews and Columbus, 3 ships setting for the New World.
So they all left at the same time. The Jews were expelled, they left, and Columbus, his 3 ships left at the same time. But go on, please.
Thank you. Although Columbus' voyage was originally scheduled for
I have
August 2nd.
teenagers. I can get heckled by anybody. Okay,
I can too. It's okay. We'll practice these. On August 2nd, he postponed it by 1 day, possibly to be in the grouping with his Jewish brethren. And additionally, because August 2nd was Tish B'Av, a bad day for a Jew to start a long journey across the ocean.
So if he was Jewish, he wouldn't have gone out on August 2nd. He would have waited until August 3rd. But that's still not proof. Go on.
Columbus repeatedly made it clear that his great and passionate goal was the liberation of Jerusalem from the Muslims. CNN was around then too.
Exactly.
Live.
Wow. Who knew?
But that's okay. A Catholic would have been passionate about that too. It's not proof. It's just more leaning towards it. Go on.
In his last will and testament of May 19th, 1506, he made a number of curious provisions that are clearly Jewish customs.
This is traditional. This is a traditional. You need to include these things in your will.
Like donation.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, 1/10 of his income to the poor. Provide an anonymous dowry for poor girls. Mama's boy. Okay, just kidding. Okay. Left money to a Jew living at the entrance of the Lisbon Jewish quarter.
There was the one person that he left it to by name.
On his final documents, he used a triangular signature of dots and letters that is similar to the inscriptions found in Jewish cemeteries in Spain.
So in Spain and Portugal, some other places, on cemeteries, there's a combination of letters and dots that say who this person was or specifically when they died. But it's a combination. It's like a code. But it's like when you go to some cemeteries today, it'll have Z. It'll say Z and then looks like quotation marks L. Well, that actually stands for may the memory be blessed in Hebrew. So the Zionist on it. Okay.
He also instructed his heirs to always use this signature in perpetuity. According to Cecil Roth's book, History of Muranos, this was an angrom, substitute for the cottage, allowing Columbus' descendants to always say cottage for him without risking their lives.
So they don't have to just have it in front of them, but it's a code that says it's another way to teach you to say cottage. Okay? Again, it's a stronger hint, but it's not a proof yet, per se. Go on. I mean, it may have just been a design he liked and he wanted on his gravestone. Go on.
Estelle Irizarry, a professor of linguistics at Georgetown, has analyzed hundreds of his handwritten letters and concluded that his Castilian Spanish is actually Ladino when writing to his son or family.
So there's Orlando, maybe, do you know Ladino at all?
No.
So give an example of what a Castilian Spanish word might be in Ladino. There's
for example, we don't use like hijo means son in Ladino is hijo.
So there's a different thing. So his Spanish was actually Ladino, which is a combination of Spanish, Portuguese, and Hebrew. It's like Yiddish, but for Sephardic Jews.
Right.
Okay, same kind of thing. Go on.
In 12 of the 13 letters he writes to his son, he has the Hebrew letters Beit and Hey at the top left corner of the letter, which stands for Be'ezrat, Hashem, with the help of God, something observant Jews write at the top of documents such as high holiday registration.
So how many of you got your high holiday registration packets? Who did not get them? Okay, we need to. Some other people didn't get those. So if you look at them, or any document the temple does, or any document that I do that's an actual document, on the top it'll have a bet and then that quotation marks. They're called chik and hey, and it stands for Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, because we realize nothing is ever happening without God's help. He wrote that. Please continue.
The one letter that he does not include this was a letter meant for King Ferdinand. This Jewish habit is as clear a proof of his Judaism as can be established short of a Brit Milah and baby naming certificate.
So short of seeing his foreskin, this is the best. No one's writing Hebrew letters like an Orthodox Jew for Bezrat Hashem if they're not Jewish. First of all, it requires that they would know what Hebrew to begin with, which is rare in Spain at that time. But secondly, you wouldn't write it if you knew, unless you were a Jew. That's a proof that he, with all the other things, especially that Columbus was actually Jewish. Go on.
Columbus' voyage was not, as is commonly believed, funded by the deep pockets of Queen Isabella, but rather by two Jewish conversos and another prominent Jew, Louis de Santigel and Gabriel Sanchez advanced an interest-free loan of 17,000 ducats from their own pocket to help pay for the voyage, as did Don Isaac Rabanel, rabbi and Jewish statesman.
So the trip actually wasn't paid for by Isabella; it was actually paid for by Jews.
How'd they find out? How come
this is all
history?
This is all. There's a book about this from Harvard Press, but this is all. That's all clear. Their loan documents are still there. Go on.
The first two letters Columbus sent back from his journey were not to Ferdinand and Isabella, but to Santa Angel and Sanchez, thanking them for their support and telling them what he had found. Not jewels, but Jews were the real financial basis for the first expedition of Columbus, wrote Herbert Adams in his 1892 treatise, Columbus and his discovery of America.
Okay.
Okay.
So Columbus was Jewish, right? Woo! So this nation was founded, discovered, so to speak, by a Jew. We go back to the very beginning with this continent, with this country. Okay. So we probably should say Christopher Columbus, sailed the ocean blue because he was thrown out of Spain and he was a Jew, or something like that, right? Because that's really what it is. That's to discover the land. But let's go on about how this country, as a nation, the United States, continues to be an expression of Judaism in so many ways. Who wants to read? This is Colonial America and the Jewish Influence, the top of page 3. Who would like to read? So let's go.
In 1649, Solomon Franco, a Sephardic Jew from Holland, believed to be first Jew who settled in Boston, was an agent for a Dutch merchant and delivered supplies to Major General Edward Gibbons of the Massachusetts militia.
So a Sephardic Jew from Holland is already involved in the financing of the nation. Okay, specifically in Massachusetts. That goes back to 1649. Continue.
In the 1650s, Asser Levy and Jacob Berenson, two Dutch Jews living in New Amsterdam,
Later
New York, successfully pressured the Dutch West India Company and Governor Stuyvesant to acquire religious freedom and not have to go to court on Saturdays, own property. Levy was the first Jew known to have owned a house and to be town burghers. Congregation Sharit Israel was founded in New York in 1654.
Okay, so again, we're at the very beginnings of this nation before it's even the United States. Continue, please.
No Christian community in history identified more with the people of the book, that would be Jews, than did the early settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, who believed their own lives to be a literal reenactment of the biblical drama of the Hebrew nation. These emigre Puritans dramatized their own situation as the righteous remnant of the church, corrupted by the Babylonian woe, and saw themselves as instruments of divine providence, a people chosen to build their new commonwealth on the covenant entered into at Mount Sinai.
This country, remember, the early settlers are coming here because they want religious freedom. So they really viewed themselves as a reenactment, as a recapitulation of the Jews getting out of Egypt and having access to a new land, a new promised land. Okay, please continue. Because now we're going to get into
Clergymen Samuel Langdon, Ezra Stiles, and John Witherspoon, the presidents, respectively, of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, all discussed revolutionary politics in biblical terms. It was during Stiles' tenure that Hebrew became a required class at Yale, and Stiles was deeply influenced by his friendship and study with Rabbi Chaim Yitzhak Taragal, from whom he learned the value of studying text in the original language.
So much so that there were even commencement speeches from Yale as well as other schools that were done in Hebrew. They actually did their commencement speeches in Hebrew. That's not, that's how deeply ensconced they were in the tradition. Go on, please. So what?
What year was Yale?
16 something.
It was
16 something.
1654, something like that.
Yale and Lynn.
Yeah. Yes. Continue on.
If you look below, you'll see the Yale seal and coat of arms has Hebrew in the midst of it, Urim Tumim, a phrase meaning light and perfection, which was carved into the ancient breastplates of the Kohen Gadol, according to the Torah.
So, if you look on the bottom of the page, and you look in the center of that blue, it says Urim Tumim. Okay? Light and perfection. It is what was on the breastplate of the high priest. Okay? So this is the seal today. This is still the seal of the nation. Please continue.
But Yale is not alone in the 9 original colleges of the colonies. Below is Columbia,
which has God's name in Hebrew at the top of it. You see the Yud Hey Vav Hey.
And Dartmouth,
which also has the Yud Hey Vav Hey in it as well. Okay, so these are Ivy League schools which don't accept Jews now, or they'd rather have students for justice in Palestine.
Yeah.
But their seals have Hebrew in them.
But they don't know that.
do they have to cover it up?
Still.
They just say, "Oh, that's Palestinian land."
Come on.
All right. Who wants to read about common sense? Who wants to read common sense? Somebody. So let's go, Fiona.
Common sense. Thomas Paine's pamphlet, published in 1776, sold over 150,000 copies. In a population of only 2.5 million nationally, this means that in proportion to the population of the colonies, this is the most sold and distributed book of any in American publishing history, and is still the all-time best-selling American title.
Pretty amazing. So that's how big. I mean, everyone read it at that time. So please continue.
Much of the pamphlet deals with the monarchy and how it should or should not be manifest in government. Payne details many teachings that are given in the book of Judges and Samuel, specifically about Gideon not choosing to accept a kingship from the ancient Hebrews, but rather telling the people that they should revere no king but God.
So Gideon and some of the judges. So what happens is we get Moses. We all know the story of Moses, right? He gets out. He goes, leads us to Israel, but he doesn't go in. Joshua leads us in. Then we have a period called the Judges. During the period of the Judges, each of the clans, each of the tribes had their own area, and it was a confederation of states. They were all run by their own state. It was all their own state, their own tribe. And then when there was a problem, a judge would help lead them all together so that they could fight a national cause. But then the national identity would not be as influential, and it was each tribe, Dan and all these things are different. We did not originally have a king until the people wanted a king. They begged for a king, and ultimately King Saul was anointed by Samuel. Please continue.
This concept of only having a king of God becomes more manifest in the basics of U.S. governmental structure as detailed by the framers. The biblical teachings of Samuel are shared by Payne that deal with Samuel's exhortations to the Hebrews not to ever have any king. The Hebrews wanted to be like other nations. Payne uses these Jewish teachings to demonstrate how America should not be subject to the English monarchy.
So before there's even a nation, Payne in common sense is saying we should have a nation and it should be structured the way that ancient Israel was. Please continue.
This concept is very Jewish and distinct from the Christian understanding that Jesus is also king, and that in Catholicism, the Pope is the earthly representation and king. Although Payne questioned the Bible as divine, he clearly appreciated the Jewish understandings and teachings from these books about monarchy and kingship.
Because remember, in Christianity, Jesus is king, and in the Pope, the church, the Pope is not king, he's the Pope, which supersedes and is above a king. He was the guys from Chicago. And which is always amazing to me, if the Pope is infallible, but he's only infallible when he sits in a chair. If the Pope just says something off the cuff, it's not infallible. When he sits in a chair, what he says is the word of God, which makes me think it's not him, it's the chair. But
he has to be infallible because he's a White Sox fan. That would be.
Having worked for the White Sox, I'm happy with that choice. Okay, please continue as we go on with the education of the Founding Fathers and some of the Founding Fathers. Please continue.
Hebrew was so popular among American educational institutions that it was a required course in all of the 9 universities established before America was established as a nation. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Penn, Brown, Dartmouth, William and Mary, Rutgers.
All 9 of the original universities in this country demanded Hebrew as a mandatory course. Please continue.
Even though Hebrew was not required in universities of England, all of the Founding Fathers who had been educated in America would have been trained in biblical Hebrew as well as Tanakh. There were even numerous commencement speeches that were given in Hebrew in the mid-18th century. Benjamin Rush wrote the following in his editorials denouncing the Tea Act. What did not Moses forsake and suffer for his countrymen? What shining examples of patriotism do we behold in Joshua, Samuel, Maccabees, and all the illustrious princes, captains, and prophets among the Jews. At the time of the American Revolution, the interest in the knowledge of Hebrew was so widespread as to allow the circulation of the story that certain members of Congress proposed that the use of English be formally prohibited in the U.S. and Hebrew substituted for it.
That's how deeply they tied themselves and associated to Jewish biblical structure and elders. Whole different world if that had happened, and we'd be reading right to left. Okay, who wants to read about Alexander Hamilton? Who saw Hamilton? Who heard of Hamilton, the show?
I know who he is, so I didn't see the show.
Okay, so who wants to read about Alexander Hamilton? What, are you just picking on Sandy?
Yeah. Ready?
He's eating.
Alexander Hamilton, the Jew. Enough research has been done that a book is coming out from
It's
Harvard
already out, by the
University
way.
Press
It's already out.
on the topic of Hamilton, the Jewish founding father. On the Danish colony of St. Croix, where before Hamilton was born, his mother, Rachel Fawcett, married a man named Johann Michael Levine. who sometimes went by the name of Levian, a Sephardic version of the name Levine. Both according to Jewish law and Dutch law of the time, Rachel would have had to convert to Judaism to marry Levine. Levian was not Hamilton's father, who was a merchant, a typical profession for Jews of the time.
Okay, so she has to convert, she marries this guy, Levine. That's her first husband. Go on, please.
Rachel and Levian had a child who was not baptized.
Which they are baptism records in St. Croix, and in most places, the church keeps very detailed baptism records. They had a child, they didn't do a baptism. If you're a Catholic, you do a baptism. Why? Because in Catholic theology, if you're not baptized, you go to hell. So that's why they do the baptism. They didn't have, their child wasn't baptized. Why? Because he was Jewish. He was Jewish. Go on, please.
They had a bad marriage, and she was arrested for whoredom. When released, she left St. Croix and went to Nevis. She was never divorced from Levian, but met James Hamilton, a Scotsman, who was Alexander's father. According to the Talmud, once someone converts, they remain a Jew, and their children, if the mother is Jewish, are Jewish.
So she never got a get. She didn't get divorced. She's still Jewish. She meets Hamilton, and they have a little baby named Alexander. Please continue.
Not getting a divorce falls in line with the challenges she would have had in initiating a get. There is no baptismal record for Hamilton on Nevis.
And again, the Catholic Church keeps copious records of baptism, so they know where the Catholics are. That's still true today. Go on, please.
He was raised in a Jewish school, and it is doubtful a Jewish school would have accepted a Christian.
So if you saw the show, it talks about how there were people that were supporting him and sent him to America. Well, that's the school that he went to yeshiva. A yeshiva's not going to take a Catholic kid. Okay? Forget about the fact that what Catholic kids would want to go to one. The yeshiva is only Jewish. That's where he was raised. Another evidence that the man is Jewish. Go on, please.
Rachel kept the last name of Levian until her death back in St. Croix in 1768, and was not buried in the Christian cemetery there. She was buried on the grounds of her sister's home, a common practice for Jews, as there were no Jewish cemetery on St. Croix.
Jewish law demands that you must be buried in a kosher ground in a Jewish cemetery. If it's a cemetery like Pierce Brothers over here in Westlake, what they've done is created a Jewish section. There has to be a road and or trees that are blocking off the Jewish section from the non-Jewish section. That doesn't exist in a lot of places, and so what Jews would do is they would get buried in the backyard of someone who has a home. It's common practice.
What if she had a tattoo?
Well, maybe she had a scarlet letter. I don't know.
There's a great Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Okay, go on, please.
He forges relationships with American Jewry that we don't see with any other founding father. According to Dr. Andrew Korwancher, author of The Jewish Founding Father, Alexander Hamilton's Hidden Life. Korwancher details that he defended Jewish rights in the courts, and that he put a Jew on the board of Columbia University, the first Jew on the board of any American college.
Again, this is all evidence of this, all compounds, and it's clear who Hamilton was. Continue.
One of the most important cases of his legal career saw Hamilton defending a French Jewish merchant, Louis Le Bouen, in a New York court in 1800. As the case progressed, Louis Le Boun's opponent's lawyer resorted to accrued anti-Semitism, accusing the Jewish merchant of old-age anti-Jewish stereotypes of being dishonest and lying under oath. Hamilton not only defended his client, he issued an eloquent defense of Jews in general. Why distrust the evidence of Jews? Hamilton passionately told the court. Jews once were under the immediate government of God himself, and they were selected as the witnesses of his miracles and charged with the spirit of prophecy. Hamilton won that case in what was at the time the largest award in American history.
Again, there he is defending the Jews, supporting the Jews. His mother's Jewish, went through yeshiva. Please continue.
Hamilton never...
So what?
Why did he just come out and say he's a Jew?
Because he wanted to be able to stay in power. He wanted to still have influence. Remember, if Hamilton hadn't had certain experiences, he probably would have run for president. Remember, he was very involved in a lot of different things, including he had a huge involvement in Thomas Jefferson's election. So, he didn't want to be segregated as the Jew. So that's what he did. Please continue. Don't ask, don't tell.
Hamilton
I don't think he was gay, but
mentioned...
don't ask, don't tell. God bless you.
Hamilton never mentions church in his writings, other than political relationships between government and church, and never publicly took communion.
Look, even Joe Biden went to go take communion, right? Hamilton didn't. Every political official who's Catholic goes and take their look, I'm at church. He never did that. Go on.
Both Hamilton and his children had close Jewish friends, another sign he was Jewish, as most non-Jews of the time would not allow their children to associate with Jewish children. Hamilton was extremely close and collaborated in writing with Kazan Gershom, Sextus, the first and only Jew to sit on the board of Columbia until Cardoza in the 20th century. When the new U.S. Constitution was being ratified by the states in 1788, Hamilton led the movement to promote ratification in New York.
Okay, so the Constitution was his baby. You know, he wrote the Federalist Papers and all this. Go on.
This was a total of his life's work, and he threw everything he had into the cause. In July of that year, Hamilton and others arranged a parade to promote the Constitution. Through his Jewish contacts, the parade organizers found that the parade conflicted with the Jewish fast day, the 17th of Tammuz. Even though Jews were less than 1% of the New York population at the time, the parade was rescheduled for the following day thanks to Hamilton's efforts.
Again, why would a non-Jew do that? So, the guy who finds this country is Jewish, Columbus. The guy who really is responsible for the infrastructure of this country, the father of the $10 bill, right, is Jewish. There's no questions about it. What about George Washington? Not a Jew, but very Jew-friendly.
Sandler song.
That's right.
Damn it.
The only one who
It's not Hanukkah.
No, I caught it.
Shouldn't it be about the Hamiltons, not the Benjamins?
should be.
Wait.
You only got 1/10. All right, who wants to read about George Washington? Somebody read about George Washington.
Yeah.
Who wants to read George Washington? Someone.
Read.
Me? What? I
No,
can't.
no.
Somebody read. Who
All
wants
right,
to
I'll
read?
read.
George Washington.
George Washington. Washington's unique position in the formation of the United States allowed him to determine whether Jews would be accepted institutionally or if they would continue to receive the hatred from governments that they had experienced in Europe. He chose the former, and here are a few written examples of the support for Jews and Judaism in America. Upon receiving a letter of congratulations from the Jewish community of Newport, the new president responded as follows. It is now...
in the shul in Newport, by the way.
Yes.
Rhode Island. Has never seen it? Have you seen it? Never seen it?
I've been...
If you go there, you can see that the letter's still there. Have you seen it, Sandy? I would love to see that. Just, I've no desire to go to Rhode Island except for that one thing, so it's kind of.
I almost went to Rhode Island, but not quite. It is now no more than toleration is spoken of, as if it were by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, in giving it all occasions their effectual support. He continues, may the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while every one shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid.
He was very clear on a lot of ethical things, one of which was the Jews need to be taken care of. They are an active and integral part of our nation. Please continue.
May the same wonder-working deity who long since delivering the Hebrews from their Egyptian oppressors, planted them in the promised land, whose providential agency has lately been conspicuous in establishing these United States as an independent nation, still continue to water them with the dews of heaven, and to make the inhabitants of every denomination participate in the temporal and spiritual blessing of that people whose God is Jehovah, 1789, letter to the congregation of Mikvah, Israel, Savannah, Georgia.
It is so important to understand that anyone who studies Bible, and it doesn't matter if it was then or now. I had a conversation with Pastor Jack Hibbs about this. It's very clear. It says, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. You can pinpoint with 100% accuracy the rise and fall of a nation as to how they treat their Jews. With total accuracy. Washington understood this. And so he was very clear about making this a Jew-friendly country. Yes?
We have someone from Israel saying, Shalom from Israel.
Alechem Shalom. So we probably need light at this point so we can see what we're doing too. All right, so let's talk about we found it, we framed it with the infrastructure, but you know what else we did? We financed it. Who wants to read about Chaim Solomon?
Of course, we love that guy.
Love the guy. Who wants to read about him? Somebody, loudly. There we go. Go.
Chaim Solomon, the founding financier, is accepted along with Robert Morris, the superintendent of finance for the colonies, as the prime financier of the American Revolution.
This is all historians accept this. These Robert Morris and Chaim Solomon were the two guys who financed the revolution. They were responsible. They did it. Please continue.
Born in Poland in 1740, this businessman immigrated to New York in 1775 and was a successful financial broker for merchants in overseas trading. He joined the Sons of Liberty and was arrested as a spy in September 1776. He was arrested again in 1778 and sentenced to death, but escaped to Philadelphia with his family. In 1781, while working with Morris, he used his personal and professional relationships to convert French loans into ready cash by selling bills of exchange.
Let's do arbitrage. Go on.
From 1781 to 1784, records show Solomon's fundraising and personal lending helped provide over $650,000, approximatly 18 million, $35,722.16 in 2018.
That was the last number Wikipedia had. So go on.
And financing to George Washington in his war effort.
Okay, go on.
Yorktown?
Yorktown.
In August 1781, the Continental Army had trapped Lieutenant General Charles Cornwallis in the Virginian coastal town of Yorktown. George Washington and the main army and Count
Rochambeau.
Rochambeau,
You know, just like rock, paper, scissors, Rochambeau.
with his French army, decided to march from the Hudson Highlands to Yorktown and deliver the final blow. But Washington's war chest was completely empty, as was that of Congress. Without food, uniforms, and supplies, Washington's troops were close to mutiny. Washington determined that he needed at least $20,000 to finance the campaign. When Morris told him there were no funds and no credit available, Washington gave him a simple but eloquent order: send for Chaim Solomon. Solomon raised $20,000 through the sale of bills of exchange. With that contribution, Washington conducted the Yorktown campaign, which proved to be the final battle of the Revolution.
Okay, this is again. Morris couldn't do it. Send for Chaim Solomon. Please continue.
In 1784, Solomon answered anti-Semitic slander in the press by famously stating, "I am a Jew. It is my own nation. I do not despair that we shall obtain every other privilege that we aspire to enjoy along with our fellow citizens."
Okay, please continue about it. This is a legend. It may or may not be true, but it's a great story if it's not.
Okay. There is a legend that during the design process of the Great Seal, Washington asked what compensation Solomon wanted in return for his financial contributions to the American Revolutionary War. He replied that he wanted nothing for himself, but that he wanted something for his people. While there is no evidence, there is a theory that the 13 stars representing the colonies on the seal were arranged in the shape of the Star of David in commemoration of Solomon's contributions. This appears to have little basis in fact, however, although it is oft repeated.
So it's been a legend for 200 years, 250 years, but there's no documentation on it. But if you look at that picture on the page before, or if you pick up a dollar bill, you see that the 13 stars representing the 13 colonies are shaped like a Magen David. That it's put down like that. It's kind of a unique shape to do. Okay, please continue.
In 1893, a bill was presented before the 52nd United States Congress ordering a gold medal be struck in recognition of Solomon's contributions to the United States. In 1941, the Field Square Monument, a structure designed by Laredo Taft, was erected at Wacker Drive and Wabash Avenue in downtown Chicago. Taft began the work but died in 1936. It was completed by his associate, Leonard Funel. The monument depicts George Washington flanked by Solomon and Robert Morris and grasping hands with both men. In 1946, a memorial statue was erected to Solomon at Hollenbeck Park in Los Angeles. The statue was rededicated in 2008 at Pan Pacific Park in the Fairfax district, where it can be found on the corner of Gardner and 3rd Street.
And I'm not sure if right now it's still up there, because they had to put barrier fences around it during the George Floyd riots. There were problems. I don't know. Well, you live by there. Is it still there? Yeah. No, is the statue still there?
At the park.
Is the statue still there? Still there? Okay. Please continue.
In 1975, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring Chaim Solomon for his contributions to the cause of the American Revolution. This stamp, like others in the Contributors to the Cause series, was printed on the front and the back. On the glue
Most stamps are not. Most stamps are only printed on one side.
On the glue side of the stamp, the following words were printed in pale green ink. Financial hero, businessman, and broker Chaim Solomon was responsible for raising most of the money needed to finance the American Revolution and later to save the new nation from collapse. The congressional record of March 25th, 1975 reads, when Morris was appointed superintendent of finance, he turned to Solomon for help in raising the money needed to carry on the war and later to save the emerging nation from financial collapse. Solomon advanced direct loans to the government and also gave generously of his own resources to pay the salaries of government officials and army officers, with frequent entries of, I sent for Chaim Solomon. Morris's diary for the years 1781 to 84 records some 75 transactions between the two men.
And by the way, he died almost penniless.
Gave it all away.
Huh? He gave it all. He gave it all to the country.
He
He gave
was
it all.
lucky he didn't have Benny.
It's-
Who was Benny?
He didn't. He gave it all. Exactly. All right. So we're going to skip over John Adams, but there's some here stuff if you'd like to read about John Adams, about James Madison, about Thomas Jefferson, and how they were all Jew friendly. Now, when we go back to this, they would be what would be called today Christian Zionists.
Mhm.
Okay, remember that. Yes.
Just want to add, just food for thought. If Hashem is involved with the founding of the country, which we think is true, the number 13 is fairly important in Judaism for the 13 attributes of mercy. And what a coinkydink that there were 13 colonies. Kind of coinkydink. So just food for thought.
13 is the number of Ahava, which means love. It's also the number of one. It's also the numerical value of God's name, Yud, He, Vav, and He, is 26. The idea that when we understand and experience our love for God, when we understand God's love and experience God's love for us, then we really have a deeper understanding of God. Okay? So let's go down to the bottom of page.
Rabbi, add one more thing. There's more coffee.
Oh, thank you. Good. Thank you. The bottom of page 13, because I think this is so fascinating, the Declaration of Independence and the Great Seal. Who would like to read? Someone else. Come on. Somebody.
Come on, volunteer.
Peter.
Declaration.
Peter, you got to come over here
Come
because
up, Peter.
he can't get his camera to see you. Or we can pull up a chair.
There's a chair right there.
Here you go.
There's a chair.
Here you go.
Right there.
Here.
I'll just use here. You can sit here.
Sit. We got a seat for you right here.
The Declaration of Independence and the Great Seal. The Torah and Talmud both teach us, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue.
You remember the root tzedek, which means justice, is the same root of the word tzaddik, which means a perfectly righteous person, and the word tzedakah, which means charity. And it says tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. It says a number of different times. Justice, justice shall thou pursue. Go on, please.
A Jewish concept, this became the spiritual foundation of the United States. As Jews, we are not just complain when we see injustice, we are to do all that we can to rectify it. The founding fathers and mothers of this country realized the importance of this teaching, and for the first time in modern history chose to fight against injustice by declaring their own nation based on ethical values. Like Jews throughout the centuries, they decided to embrace the concept that there are unalienable rights. The original document uses unalienable as opposed to inalienable, and that all men are created equal. No rabbi in their homily could have worded it better. On July 4th, 1776, the day that independence was declared, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson were asked to design a seal for the nation. Both Franklin and Jefferson wanted the seal to include imagery of Moses leading the Exodus from Egypt, crossing the sea, and God being present with them in their journey through the wilderness.
That's how our founding fathers viewed themselves, that they were the recapitulation of the ancient Hebrews getting out of Egypt. They got out of the slavery of England, and they were creating a new land, going to a promised land. Please continue.
Preserved in a note from August of 1776, in his own handwriting, Ben Franklin wrote, Moses standing on the shore and extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm Pharaoh, who is sitting in an open chariot, a crown on his head and a sword in his hand, raised from a pillar of fire in the clouds, reaching to Moses to express that he acts by command of deity.
This picture is the original seal that the three men wanted. That's the original seal of the United States. Can't be more Jewish than that. Can't have deeper Jewish roots. Sorry, what? They did teach this at Harvard.
Not now.
Not now. Not now. Go on, please.
Jefferson's ideal seal included not only this image, but an image of the children of Israel being led in the wilderness by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. The two were combined into the original proposed seal below.
And that's it. Where it also says obedience, that it says that rebellion to tyranny, to tyrants, is obedience to God. Something we need to remember today. Mm-hmm. Who wants to read about the structure of the Jewish values and structure in the organization of our government? I mean, there's a lot. You guys seeing how deeply involved in ensconced Judaism is. Who else wants to read? Come on, someone else.
Okay. Jewish values and structure in the organization of the government. The Jewish government, according to the original constitution, which was divinely established, was a perfect republic. The civil polity of Israel is doubtless an excellent general model. At least some principal laws and orders of it may be copied to great advantage in more modern establishments. So said Harvard President Samuel Langdon in 1775. A Republic of the United States. In the book of Judges, the tribes of Israel each have their own territory and come together under a judge, Joshua, Gideon, Samson, and so on. Only when they need to unify for a specific purpose, such as defense against enemies of the republic. Ancient Israel was not a kingdom until Saul, but a confederacy of states. It was this model that the framers used to define the relationships between the states. Following the conquest of Jericho and the settlement of Canaan, Israel had no king or central authority, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. Isaiah 33:22 is often used by academics as a basis for the initial structuring of the three branches of government. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, and the Lord is our king. He will save us.
They're your three branches of government, aren't they? Judicial, legislative, and executive. Please continue.
The House of Representatives represents 435 districts of the U.S., where the people of each district elect one person to represent their views and interests. The idea of district elections is implicit in the Torah. We read in Deuteronomy 1:13, "Select for yourselves men who are wise, understanding, and known to your tribes, and I will appoint them as your leaders." Exodus 18:19 states, "Seek out from among all the people, men with leadership ability, God-fearing men, men of truth who hate injustice." Similar qualifications are prescribed in the original constitutions Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. Each tribe was to select the best men to be their representatives. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch comments that each tribe, Shevet, is to choose out of its own midst men whose character can only be known by their lives, hence whose character is known only to those who have associated with them. This is the biblical source of residential requirements in representatives and senators in the U.S. Also, what is here called a tribe was called a district, Pelish, after the second temple period.
Okay, so the whole concept of the House of Representatives is from Torah. They didn't make this. I mean, we talk about how brilliant the framers were. They were, but they also were just duplicating what already existed in the Torah, and they were knowledgeable about the Torah to begin with. Please continue.
It is a principle of Jewish law that no legislation should be imposed upon the public unless the majority can conform to it. This requires legislators to consider or consult the opinions of their constituents. Hence, representative democracy can be attributed to Judaism by adding that representatives must be men who are wise and haters of bribes. This would make for an aristocratic democracy, or a universal aristocracy, a kingdom of priests. The Senate represents the 50 states of the federal union. It therefore represents the federal principle. But the idea of federalism goes back to the Torah and the 12 tribes. Each tribe had its own distinct identity, its own governor, and its own judicial system. A unitary executive, or president, is a Torah principle. When Moses told Joshua to consult the elders when he was about to lead the Jews across the Jordan, God countermanded Moses. There can only be one leader in a generation. And if we look at Tractate Sanhedrin 8a, we see that Jewish law opposes collective leadership. Additionally, just to
make it clear, Jewish law is antithetical to socialism. Okay? We don't believe in collective leadership. It's very clear. There should be a unitary leader, but there should be a separate legislative and judicial bodies. Socialism of a collective leadership is antithetical to Judaism.
And yet Jews were...
And yet Jews have been involved. They've been involved, but they were secular. They stepped away from the Judaism. Please continue.
Additionally, just as a president of the United States must be a native-born American and not a naturalized citizen, so a king of ancient Israel must be born of a Jewish mother and not a ger or convert. The Supreme Court is the final interpreter of the American Constitution and is a direct copy of the model of the Great Sanhedrin, which was the final interpreter of the Jewish Constitution, the Torah.
That's where the dialogues of Talmud come from, the dialogues between the sages of the Sanhedrin. Go on.
Like the Sanhedrin, judgments are based on precedents, but judgments are also made reinterpreting the words of Torah based on Parashah Shoftim in the book of Deuteronomy, which teaches that we should go to the judges of your times. Samuel 7:15-6 is often understood as the basis for lifetime appointments for judges, as well as the concept of circuit courts. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he went from year to year on a circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, and judged Israel in all those places.
So do you guys see how our entire three branches of government is based directly on the Tanakh? Bless you. Okay? We found the country. We frame the country, we finance the country, and our structure is what the infrastructure of the country is. Who wants to read, this is just a little bit of fun, the Liberty Bell. Who's seen the Liberty Bell? Great, one of you who's seen it can read it. Bless you.
Liberty Bell.
Liberty Bell. Go.
It is often a little more. Okay. It is often assumed that the bell celebrates freedom from British rule. Not the case, though. The bell predates the revolution by more than 20 years. Rather, a majority part of the liberty most likely celebrated, and here comes the Jewish tie-in, is religious freedom, both freedom of expression and freedom from legal discrimination on religious grounds. The Liberty Bell was commissioned by the Pennsylvania Assembly to celebrate the 50th anniversary of a remarkable document, William Penn's Charter of Rights and Privileges, issued for the citizens of the state in 1701. It provides for liberty of conscience, declaring no people can be truly happy through under the greatest employment of civil liberty, if abridged of the freedom of their consciences as to their religious profession and worship. The nickname Liberty Bell comes from the passage inscribed across the top. Proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. Leviticus 25:10. This passage from Leviticus is about the Jubilee year, at which time all slaves are free.
Bless you.
God bless you. It is for this reason that the Liberty Bell became a unifying symbol for abolitionists and freeing of slaves, ultimately being a symbol for coming together in peace after the Civil War, all based on yet another passage from the Torah.
So,
some first
so then we have a couple of pages of first Jews in different places. So, how many of you listen to the podcast or radio show? You all should just, even if you don't listen to it, stream it, put it on silent just so we get the downloads, so that if we have enough people streaming it, then they can start selling advertising, which becomes a fundraiser for the temple.
But I want to go to Reno.
So what?
I want to go to Reno.
You want to go to Reno after the Atlantis Resort and Casino? It's actually a fabulous place.
It's amazing.
So it is. So I've had some interesting conversations with some different people. One of whom is Alan Dershowitz, Professor Dershowitz, who really believes that in today's world in America, he made a great comment. He said in the 60s he fought for black civil rights because the fight for civil rights was taking place in that world. In the 90s he fought for gay civil rights because that's where the battle was. He said for now and for the rest of his life, he's fighting for Jewish civil rights because that is the civil right that's being violated in our nation today. It's a fascinating statement, and he is truly an ultimate libertarian, an ultimate constitutional scholar. He's 87 years old, and for 50 years was professor at Harvard Law School. Brilliant. So I find that interesting. I also found interesting a conversation with a man named Pastor Jack Hibbs. I try and stay away from commenting on Christian scriptures because I don't know Greek. And I know that if you don't know Hebrew, your translations are, you're relying on a translator. Pastor Hibbs had an interesting comment. His belief is that this entire country was created for one purpose: to help create and support the nation of Israel. His belief is that, and he decided all sorts of Christian texts to justify it. That he believes that based on the text, you can't deny the fact that this nation exists for that purpose of supporting and helping create and support Israel. And in fact, if we stop doing that, we will stop as a nation receiving the blessings of God. Fascinating. Also, a conversation with James Lindsay that is appropriate. How many of you have heard anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? Right? Lindsay's point, and I think this is a brilliant point, is that's not true. Anti-Zionism is worse than anti-Semitism. Here's his logic. Anti-Semitism is a hatred for Jews. Anti-Zionism is a hatred for Jews and anyone who's Jew-friendly. So anti-Zionism is actually a bigger umbrella. All of our founding fathers were Christian Zionists, except for Alexander Hamilton, who was Jewish. The rest of them were Christian Zionists, what we would call today Christian Zionists. Those are supporters of Israel. Those are supporters of the Jewish people because they understand the text. So all of these people who are saying, oh, you can't be a Christian and still support Israel. You can't be a Christian and not support Israel. You cannot be a Christian and be an anti-Semite. You just can't do it. It's against the theology of Christianity. It's plain and simple. So that's the first big piece in this. The other big piece, and I think this is the takeaway for the evening, we've been involved in the creation and depth of this nation since it began. From Columbus through Hamilton, the Declaration of Independence, all of these different things, financing it with Time Solomon. If you look at the first, you'll see that we repeatedly, there's Jewish values coming up and being part of it. The argument right now that is so prevalent in our culture are the statements of anti-Semites like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, the Tate brothers, people like this. And part of their argument is the same argument that was used against Kennedy when he ran for president. When Kennedy ran for president, none of us are old enough to really have been at that point. He was a Catholic. And so the idea was he's going to be more loyal to the Catholic Church than he is America. As if you can't do both. Especially in Judaism, where we don't have a supreme leader like a pope. It's the exact opposite. If you are an observant Jew, if you are tied to Judaism, then you need to realize that this is the greatest country that's ever existed outside of Israel. Amen. Plain and simple. Any Jew must be, by definition, in the same way a Christian cannot be an anti-Semite by definition if they're really Christian, if you're a Jew, you got to be a patriotic American. At the same time, you cannot be a patriotic American and not be Jew-friendly. It doesn't work. It's an inherent contradiction. So when these people start spouting off whatever they're spouting off, whatever hate they're spouting off, which has become so prevalent, we need to be clear that that's not the case. But we need to also remember Professor Dershowitz's teaching. This man is 87 years old. It's time, because this is the battle of civil rights. If someone doesn't support Israel, they don't get our support. Financially, energetically, etc. If someone doesn't support Israel, they're not American. They're not really being true to these values that we've studied. If someone doesn't support Israel, then it's a two-way bridge. If they want our support, they got to give support as well. What's happening all too often is for both Jews and for people who are not Jews, but they're not sure where on the fence they sit, they're scared to say anything. They're hesitant to say that's wrong. They don't want to start a fight. Well, in 1960, whatever, pick the year, if someone had said the N-word and said about blacks or monkeys, any responsible person who wasn't black would have said, stop that. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. That's hateful. It's prejudice. It's antithetical to Christianity. It's antithetical to Judaism. It's antithetical to American values. Everyone did that, didn't they? And in the 90s, people did that with gays. Well, today, when you hear anyone saying anything bad about Israel, it is our responsibility, privilege, and blessing to go up and say, you know what? You're wrong. We are an integral part of this nation. You can use this document. We are an integral part. We are tied into the nation as the same way the nation is tied to us. When someone espouses anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism plus, it is our responsibility to go up and say, stop. Here's the reality in America. Most people are not anti-Semitic. Most people haven't even spent any time with a Jew, let alone more than one. The majority of people have not met a Jew. And it's our responsibility when the people, most of America is not anti-Semitic. Most of America is also not pro-Israel. Because again, it's not in their consciousness. They're thinking about their mortgage payment, their kid's basketball game, golf tournament, whatever it might be. They're thinking about whatever they're thinking about in their life. I need to get married. I need to have a child. I need to plan retirement. I'm worried about the stock exchange. Whatever it is, Israel's not in their consciousness. We need to make it clear that those people who best are termed a-Semite, they're not anti, they're not pro, they got no feelings. Those are the people, like the independent voters determine an election, right? Those are the people that we need to convert to make them realize, wait a minute, we're an integral part of this nation. You can't be a Jew without being a patriotic American. You can't be a patriotic American without being Jew-friendly. We need to go to those people and explain to them the realities. When someone starts saying, like Anna Kasparian, whatever the hell her name is, right? And she's saying, Israel's horrible, and they've taken organs from their prisoners for organ donations, and they've trained dogs to rape Palestinians. All of that is absurd and disgusting. We need to remind people instead that the Quran encourages, does not even say it's permissible, encourages lying if it will help achieve the goal of a worldwide caliphate.
Exactly.
Yes.
We need to point out the truth.
Yes.
It's a key to get. We need to do that. We need to step up and say, you know what? What you're saying is just wrong. And you need to look at the realities. We need to remind them, show them a video of October 7th and what happened, where there's video of that going on. So there's no video of any of this other Hazarai, right? They proudly took videos of it. It is our responsibility right now. The real anti-Semites, you're never going to convert. You're never going to get them to be pro-Israel. They hate us. A lot of reasons. I've given classes on anti-Semitism. There's a lot of reasons that they justify it. Those people are not going to typically change. But the people who are a-Semitic, who are not convinced on one side or the other, but they are Americans, they're proud Americans, whatever side of the aisle they vote on. Those are the people we need to reach out. We need to teach about what the Quran really says. We need to teach about Jewish relationships. And we need to show that this nation doesn't exist as it is without Judaism. It just doesn't exist. That's where the battle is. The Talmud teaches that if you see a crime being committed across the river and you do nothing to try and prevent the crime, you are guilty of the crime. This is not just a crime that you're seeing across the river. If you're seeing someone spout off about Israel, spout off about anti-Semitism, you need to step up and say this just isn't the case. Yeah.
I have a question. I grew up in a conservative temple. I started at our temple preschool.
Hadad Ariel.
Hadad Ariel. And all the way till 16, where I was confirmed. But at that, I didn't make Hebrew high school. I was too stupid. But anyways,
or too smart.
Yeah. And I went to Israel in 1970. But I got to tell you something. This was never taught in Hebrew school, and I think that's a shanda. This kind of education needs to be taught to our Jewish kids, to their parents, and I think that's where we're missing the boat. And I think that I don't know if you could do a podcast on this, but I got to tell you something. This is very enlightening, and like I always say, better late than never to learn. And I always love learning. And I think I'm going to say it again. It's a shanda that children, Jewish children going to Hebrew school, are not learning this.
So I will again quote Professor Dershowitz, because he's much wiser than I can ever imagine being. So what do we do about the problems with anti-Semitism? And his answer, we need new rabbis. The problem is the rabbis. He said even more so, the rabbinic schools, which have all become woke. So on the one hand, you have the reform and conservative movement, which the vast majority are on the far left politically. They don't want to touch this because it's not in sync with what their values are. As an example, let's talk about abortion for a second. The Jewish take on abortion, I've given classes on it. The Jewish take on abortion is very clear, and I wrote a book on it. It's very clear. It is not about the right of the fetus at all. It's all about the rights of the woman, of the mother. But with rights come responsibilities, and in the same way, the fetus is actually considered a limb of the mother or a thigh of the mother. If you don't like the way your leg looks, you don't get to go to a doctor and say amputate. In the same way, because that's a desecration of God. In the same way, abortion is forbidden unless it threatens the life. It's called a road death. It threatens the life of the mother in some way, and that could include psychologically or emotionally. But what happens is that Reform rabbi says, well, I am pro-abortion because that's how I was raised. So now that I've said my target is pro-abortion, that's my bullseye, I'm going to draw a target around and say, look, Judaism is pro-abortion. It's not. Okay? This should be being taught by rabbis. It should be taught in rabbinic schools, but it's not.
Not even in the rabbinic
Not less in the rabbinic schools.
Really?
And if you want the proof on that, there were a number of years ago, 7-8 years ago, I think, there was a letter written by rabbinic and cantorial students from 3 or 4 of the major schools in the Reform and Conservative movement. It was a public letter that was published, I believe, in the New York Times, among elsewhere, where they were saying, enough of all this, we need to have a two-state solution, Palestinians are being abused, etc., etc. And I wrote an article about it, saying, these are supposed to be the future Jewish leaders. They should all be thrown out of rabbinic school right now. But that would mean less money for those rabbinic schools. That would mean that the dean, who's making $400,000 a year, wouldn't be able to get that salary. And the people that I blame are not the students. They're useful idiots. It's the deans. It's the board of directors, the people who are involved in those schools. Dershowitz's point is we need to make the shift from the bottom up and from the top down. That we need to make a shift as people and demand more of our rabbis, of our synagogues, of our rabbinical schools, and say exactly what you said. Why is this not being taught to children? Why is it that the vast majority of kids, how many of you, before being here, ever heard of Chaim Solomon when you were a child? 1, 2, couple, right? 5, 10% of the people here.
What about the University of Judaism? Do they set the curriculum for Hebrew schools?
No.
Do they give money out to?
They don't set a curriculum for anything. It's now AJU, and it's conservative. It's a Jewish university in theory, kind of sort of. You can get an undergraduate degree there, and it's a rabbinic school for the conservative movement, along with JTS. You're right. This should all be taught to children. Why isn't it? Well, you know what? That's the teacher's fault. It's the board's fault. It's the rabbi's fault. And it's very frustrating to me that there were hundreds of, so I'm not going to say which one, but at one of the largest Reform synagogues here in Los Angeles, a few years ago when the Iran deal happened, the rabbi, who's extremely far left, and we're on tape, and I'm with ladies, so I'm not going to say exactly what he is. Anyone speak Arabic? You were the one person.
Well, it's Hebrew. It's not even Arabic.
No, it's originally Arabic, I think, isn't it?
Fatihah is peace in Hebrew. Fatihah.
So, but the phrase
is shalom.
So,
Peace. Piece of cake.
no, peace like the IEC. He got up on, it was either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, and he talked about how you're a bad Jew if you don't support Obama's Iran deal. And 200 to 300 Jews, most of them Persian, by the way, got up and walked out. And you know what they did, though? They all renewed their dues. They all kept going to the temple. So why should that rabbi change? That same rabbi, and I know this because Allison's dad was one of the founding members of this temple. He'd been there for, he's been there for 50 years, 55 years, or whatever it is. And he sent a letter afterwards to the rabbi saying, I don't come to your temple so I can hear your politics. And you guys notice I don't talk politics from the pulpit. I do a lot of writing and a lot of speaking that's political, but it never comes from the pulpit, does it? And so David, my father-in-law, wrote a letter saying, I don't come here for that. I want to hear about Torah. I want to hear about God. And he got a letter back from this rabbi saying, and I've seen it, saying effectively, well, if you don't agree with this, you're a bad Jew. David then wrote a letter back, and he said, well, if you're going to keep doing this, I'm going to leave the temple I've been a member of for 50 years. You got a letter back from the rabbi.
Bye-bye.
You will be missed.
Oh my God.
So if people aren't walking when a rabbi is putting down Israel, when a rabbi is bad-mouthing Israel from the pulpit or elsewhere, that's not okay. I learned from Rabbi Shulchan. I've always had 2 rules, and then I found out they were Rabbi Shulchan's rules. God bless his soul. 2 things you don't do from a pulpit. Number 1, you don't preach politics. Number 2, because that's not why people are there. Number 2, you never badmouth Israel. Because the moment you do, everyone else who's an anti-Semite says, oh, look, the rabbi's badmouthing Israel. See?
80% of the congregation.
I can't comment on it.
No, I'm just in general. Debate.
Yeah.
That's what's
Of the
happening.
Reform conservative world. And then you have the Orthodox world who make it a point to say, all too often, this is how you have to be a Jew, and if you're not, you're a bad Jew. And we're not even going to talk about anything else. This is how that doesn't appeal to people either. We need to demand of our rabbis, of our teachers, of our schools. Why is a Jewish day school preaching and teaching the kids that there should be a two-state solution? There's been a two-state solution. They tried it in 1948. Didn't work. Arabs didn't want it. That's what Jordan's decided on the other state. So that's our obligation. And that's what we need to do, Barry. I mean, we need to be more demanding, and we need to speak out. When we hear someone sitting there and saying, 43% of Jews under the age of 30 voted for Zoran Mandani. 43% of Jews under the age of 30 in New York. Okay? It's scary.
What are they going to do in Maine? Wait, what is that?
The big Reform Temple in New York disinvited when Alan Dershowitz said, I can no longer be a Democrat because this one issue is so big. The big temple in New York said, well, we scheduled you to speak, but we're canceling it now. As opposed to having dialogue. So you don't agree with him. So have someone else come up and debate Professor Dershowitz. What's the problem? Elu ve'elu. These words and these words can both be words of God. What? They just disinvited him. So it's our obligation to make a point of saying we are Jews and we are Americans. I asked Jonathan Tobin today, we taped the show for Sunday, and given the anti-Semitism, are we Jews living in America or are we Americans who happen to be Jewish? His answer was, we should be both. This is our country. Not only Jewish country, but we are part of it. And we need to step up and own that and the responsibility that comes with that. We help find it. We help fund it. We help create an infrastructure. We help create everything. We're an integral part of it. And
We're too small.
what?
What's Chabad's opinion?
Chabad has Chabad is different than it was when the Rebbe was alive. Let's just start with that. When the Rebbe was alive, people who became ordained as rabbis were knowledgeable men. They had to learn. Now my understanding is you can become a Chabad rabbi in either 1 or 2 years. You just don't know how to daven real fast. And typically your father or father-in-law or uncle is a Chabad rabbi.
Every denomination has the same problem with how they feel about Israel. Reform, conservative, Orthodox. I mean, within the Orthodox movement, you have the Nukatsuri and all the problems that they bring and all that stuff. So every movement has the same problem. One of the biggest problems with us is that we even have any type of movement within Judaism.
That's why we're not attached to a movement. You guys all know that.
You know, in Israel, everyone's just Jewish.
That's all it is here. That's all it is here.
It's ridiculous.
That's why if you look at temples that in the last 20 years, 30 years, that the ones that survived COVID and that are thriving are actually what's called post-denominational. So I teach Orthodox theology. You all know that. We use a conservative prayer book, and our liturgy we do in a very reformed way. We have amplified music. We do a lot in English, etc. Judaism we don't need all these distinctions, and we need to stop it. And we need to realize that our tie to Israel is so important. It's so important. Eugene Fisher, excuse me, of the Central Conference of Bishops years ago said, a Catholic will never understand a Jew's tie to Israel, and a Jew will never understand how a bunch of guys go into a building, white smoke comes out, and one of them is suddenly infallible. Because it doesn't make sense to us either, but it makes sense for them. Bottom line is that we need to step up. We've been quiet too long. I'm not saying we need to all go be Mir Kahana and every Jew at 22. Okay, I am saying when Joel's saying that, I am saying that we need when people are making stupid comments, ignorant comments. We need to step up and point out how wrong they are. That's our obligation, our responsibility, and our privilege. Because at the end of the day, we are Jews and we are Americans. And we need to be both. Both for the nation and for our culture. I hope this was helpful. I hope there was some fun stuff. It makes July 4th that much more fun. And we have services at the park this Friday night. Shabbat under the stars at the park at 7 o'clock, not 7:30. 7, I know. So, and just have that's. I hope this was fun.
Game by any chance?
What game?
USA Paraguay soccer World Cup.
No, but if you want, you can bring a soccer player.
Have golf balls. We'll hit them with golf.
I'll go golf balls. Thank you guys, and I hope I'll see you on Friday.
USA play.
Thanks.